What's up, folks? I'm Odd, by the way, and today I wanted to play with some toys, specifically wind-up toys. I've got a whole assortment of them here. I made a little collection of them. The main idea initially, I think at some point or another, was thinking it might be fun content to race them. Honestly, overall, they may have just been a dopamine purchase. I have recently inherited, effectively, more art supplies. So if you've seen my other videos where I have done traditional art, I've spoken a bit before about the fact that I have boxes. Not really, not a whole lot of boxes, but for digital artists, they're definitely a lot. I have been trying to use more of my stuff, and to see what I will use and continue to use, and what I probably honestly need to clear out. But that is my intention for today. Now I have the box. The big box is definitely something that is available to us. However, I think I'm going to start here. These are my dupes. I separated them from the originals almost explicitly for this purpose, I think. Let's look at some of these. I might just pick one that I like. I have here, first guy's a little cockroach. I haven't looked at these in a while. We have a crab who goes sideways. We got a monkey who walks in a handstand. And I believe we have another handstand guy in here. Yeah, we do. This is effectively the same thing. We have a little seal who walks on a handstand. So these are like circus animals. We have a horse racer that is kind of more or less like a bronco. Like it's not going to be running perfectly. It like jumps and kicks everywhere, I'm pretty sure. Creepy witch. A blue mouse. A cricket, kind of Jiminy Cricket style, very stylized, very cute. We got a little ladybug whose wings flap. You've got a turtle who I assume might be made for the water. Or he's meant to sit on his shell because his little winder's on the bottom and he's just meant to struggle. That would be sad. I think he's meant to swim. And our last one in the dupes is... Wow. Can you... There he is. Wow. I should put this on autofocus. It was just annoying me. But we've got this Hunchback of Notre Dame-esque guy who rolls and then just swings his arms. So that's interesting. As it goes, I think I want to do 2 of these guys, maybe. An interesting thing is going to be as well that I don't want to alter the shape or the size of these already too much, because they already kind of have trouble keeping balance. So it will mostly just be a paint job, which is part of the reason that I did this, but I think that I could add some little bits to them, like a couple of beads or something to like more fully customize them. But overall, I'm not going to be sculpting or adding anything egregious onto them, because they still need to be able to move, hopefully. Honestly, I'm really enjoying this cricket. This little jockey's face. Just a little smiley face. Because both of these have very simple paint jobs as well. They're mostly just like 2 to 3 colors each. And a lot of these are quite cheaply made in that regard, honestly. I think I got them off of like Amazon or maybe Temu. I'm not totally sure. It was a good couple years ago, and they've been sitting on my shelf forever. But that is going, I think, to be my intention as I clean these little guys up. And I will begin my process of trying to figure out what I'm going to do with these guys and actually painting them. And once we get to that part of the process, I'll probably be out of this white shirt as well. But at that, I will roll this over to the actual process of making them, and I will see y'all later. Now, if it wasn't already obvious that I don't do a lot of physical projects like this, when I went to go wash off my silicone mat in the kitchen, several members of my family came in, and each of them asked, "What is that?" I swear this happens like every time, too. After getting that ready, though, I started the process by disassembling the toys so I wouldn't be messing up any of their internal mechanisms. I realized partway through that I should probably keep these parts secure, so I made sure to put them into labeled bags for reassembly later. Then I went off camera and outside in 90+ degree heat to sand them so that the paint would stick better. I also sanded down some of the tack on the rider toy that didn't make sense so I could paint on something different, but I'll get to that later. Next, I gave each of the toys a white base coat to work from. Here it was especially nice that they were basically in half, meaning that I didn't need to wait for one side to dry to work on the other. I tried to make sure that any holes weren't blocked off by the paint as I work, though admittedly this wasn't something I really kept track of with the other coats. I also gave the insides of the shell a cursory coat of paint to try and prevent the original colors from shining through too much. But in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best idea. I wound up doing 2 coats on each one with a piddly attempt at editing the transition on our jockey toy. Ooh, magical. And now is when the process begins to diverge. First up is the toy I think I called a cricket throughout the intro, when it probably makes more sense that it would be a grasshopper, given its appearance and that it, hops. I decided beyond just giving these toys more detail, I wanted to take a more fantastical approach. You know I love a character too. Before I even took the toys apart, I had actually mapped out the basic idea of what I wanted digitally. It's my usual process and overall just faster to work with. For the grasshopper, I wound up feeling very drawn to a very alien, space-inspired look with some pinks and purples. I did keep in a bit of the green and a gradient, just barely touching the ends of the wings and the antennae. I also gave the characters names at this stage. I went for the name Melvin for this guy. Honestly, I was thinking of that one old joke I think I heard through Family Guy that's like, a man sees a grasshopper on his way home from a bar and says, "Hey, did you know there's a drink named after you?" And the grasshopper says, "There's a drink named Irving." I just wanted something with that same vibe without taking the name directly, so I went with the second most silly random guy name I could think of, thus Melvin. I think the joke would probably work with any name really, but I like the kind of older vibe of the name as well. I think Melvin is some interdimensional being that hops between universes, and while that seems impressive, they really just do like grasshopper things. They might have a pearl of advice or something, but ultimately they just kind of exist. So, I started up the camera to paint, but then immediately realized I didn't have, anything ready. Eventually, I decided to opt for lining my palette tray with this, press and seal stuff to both preserve it between sessions and for easier cleanup later. Now, I'm a bit rusty when it comes to mixing paint, and I've never been good at doing it without a good amount of experimentation. It took me an hour in my first attempt to mix something somewhat close to what I had digitally, and even then it was quite a bit duller and redder. Between base coats of the body color, my camera's light battery also crapped out, and I didn't notice the camera itself had also frozen, so either the footage is dark or non-existent. It didn't really matter in the end, because I wound up ultimately deciding I actually hated that palette. One thing I did kind of initially forget from the painting classes I did take a while ago was that it is hard to mix a very vibrant purple because by nature, red and blue neutralize each other, resulting in something closer to gray. It doesn't help that my existing reds are all almost orange-toned. I wound up making several attempts and eventually decided to stop trying with the cling film stuff just because I was using too much. I was finally able to get something relatively vibrant because I had just found a pre-existing purple among the craft paints to mix in. When I was happy with that, chalk up another 2 base coats of paint for Melvin. While there's the benefit of not having to wait for one side or another to dry while painting, the 2 sides were also hard to match that way, especially where patterns on the body are supposed to meet. I wound up kind of dry fitting the body together to make sure these little details all lined up. Eventually, I remembered that I also had access to a multitude of paint pens I wanted to try. My mom had bought this big box from a brand called WUO, which I will forever read as a Crash Bandicoot style whoa. I wound up choosing to use the pinks provided there over the ones that I mixed because they were that much more vibrant. They seem pretty decently opaque and they dry extremely quickly, which is saying something because the other acrylic paint I was using is pretty fast drying too. Most coats dried in a matter of minutes, but the pens dried in seconds. At some point while detailing, I tried to use the dotting tool for fine lines in the liquid paint like I've seen other artists do before, but I found better control in just the tip of a fairly small brush. The pens were especially nice for the final touches, though they obviously aren't made for something like a gradient. Despite that, I was able to get some blending in for the green gradients on the wings and antennae by acting very quickly with the wet paint and a dry brush. And off Melvin goes for a layer of glossy varnish, which we will see in the assembly later. Next up is our poor jockey on their bucking mount. Keeping with the very fantastical theme, as well as just the inspiration of the rider's very silly face, I wanted to make characters based off of desserts. I decided on a gingerbread person like Ryder, though I think she's actually closer to something like a graham cracker, and a burnt marshmallow mule. Again, just from a production side of things, the speed paints you see happened before anything else, so this is also where I decided I would sand down that bottom piece of the tack. As it sat, it kind of just disappeared into nothingness or implied a really awkward position on the neck. I know the jockey is basically holding onto their ears, so it doesn't really matter, but I am nothing if not an animal nerd, and that detail was just bothering me at the time. Our graham cracker cookie person is named Honey, and their marshmallow mule is just called Miss Marshmallow. Honey was kind of scammed as an aspiring rider. She thought she was getting a full-blooded marshmallow Mustang, but what she got instead was an unruly and burnt marshmallow mule. Despite discovering this far too late and losing a lot of money on the lie, Honey ultimately really admires Miss Marshmallow's fire, and the two of them make a great pair. Mixing paint for these two was much more straightforward, just in the nature of it being a collection of mostly browns. It was still kind of difficult to get them exactly where I wanted them, especially the more golden color of the toasted marshmallow. I started with a slightly darker white for the unburnt portions of Miss Marshmallow, and then blending the gradients for the toasted and burnt spots. It helped that the blending didn't have to be perfectly smooth. I mean, if you look at a toasted marshmallow, it's usually all bubbly and rough, and I was able to get a fun texture in the paint to resemble that. I did wind up changing my initial idea for the tack from a matching red to Honey's riding gear, and decided on a chocolate color to really get a full s'mores vibe. I also changed up the initially white royal frosting for Honey's hair to chocolate too. The overall level of detail I'm able to achieve zoomed in on a digital canvas is obviously more than what I could reasonably do on the paint job, but I think I got pretty close, all things considered. I was at least able to get most of the expression on Honey's face and some rosy cheeks for her. The paint pens came out for most of that and any plain white on the design. I even used a more eggshell color for Miss Marshmallow's eyes to make them look even more like her unburnt color, although I'm not totally sure if it stands out well enough. This duo was definitely the more difficult of the two toys, just from the sheer number of little nooks and crannies alone. The area between Honey's front and the back of Miss Marshmallow's head was probably the most nerve-wracking, as I tried not to mess up either's paint jobs, particularly Miss Marshmallow's hard-won gradients. But, at last, these two were finally able to be given a coat of varnish, and we are finally on to assembly. Initially, I had the thought of reviewing the footage I had taken of taking these two apart in order to put them back together, but it wound up being difficult to see all of the tiny details. Thankfully, these are duplicates, so I just grabbed those and took them apart for reference. I already thought Melvin's original design was rough, but man, their twin is terrifying. Admittedly, I probably got a little overzealous in paint after the base coat, because though I was trying to avoid filling any holes with paint there, I definitely clogged a few with all the other colors. Thankfully, I was able to kind of bore through them, but it roughed up the paint in some spots. The leg spring was the trickiest part because it had a hook under the legs and also went behind the gearbox. I probably should have just grabbed a pair of tweezers or something because my hands were definitely getting crampy with all the little small grasping movements. Honey's twin has a Stetson and a horse with a mane. No wonder I relegated this version to the dupe bag, but man, I wish I'd remembered that. Then again, we probably wouldn't have had these characters, and I do like them a lot. Our Cowpoke Crowder can have another design someday, maybe. In hindsight, I probably should have avoided painting as much of the internal stuff as I could. The coats of paint kind of gummed up the works, and I wound up removing some as I went to make things easier. I took apart Honey and Miss Marshmallow multiple times off camera to troubleshoot them not moving well, but I think the main problem was actually the mat they were on, because they moved when I removed it. And after some troubleshooting, they did move. The one thing I did notice that may be a continuing problem is just how much heavier the painted designs were compared to their counterparts. I think it's a good portion of the reason why Miss Marshmallow doesn't quite leave the ground as much, and though Melvin can hop, I think they were a bit bogged down by their weight too. I'd say this was worth it. But the toys themselves are a bit less functional, so I don't know if it's something I'll do all of the time unless I find another way to do so. It was still really fun though, and I enjoyed the character creation within the limitations of the toy design, as well as the almost miniature painting level of detail I was able to fuss over here. Probably not an everyday thing for me, but definitely challenging in a very satisfying way at the time. And those are my little repainted toys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you liked it, and if I may suggest, check out a few of my other videos to see if you'd like to subscribe and stick around for a while. Otherwise, let me know if you'd like to see more of this or any other art challenges down in the comments below. At that though, I'll leave this here, and I will see you all next time.